Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Real World, Real Stories, a place where we explore important global events and international issues while helping you improve your English through thoughtful conversations and real-world topics that shape our modern world.
Today's episode is designed especially for B1 English learners. So if you are at an intermediate level and you want to learn real vocabulary while understanding global news, you are in exactly the right place.
Now, let me ask you something. Imagine you go to a petrol station, or a gas station, depending on where you live, and the price is suddenly 30 or 40% higher than last week. Or you go to the supermarket and your favorite products cost more than before. You might ask, why? What happened? The answer, very often, starts somewhere far away, in the Middle East, in the waters of the Red Sea, or in the decisions of a small group of powerful countries. That is exactly what we are talking about today.
Oil prices have been rising sharply in recent months, and the conflict in the Middle East is making things much more difficult for global shipping, which means the movement of goods by sea, and for energy markets around the world. This is not just a story for economists or politicians. It is a story that affects you, your family, and people in every country.
Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and write a comment telling us which country you are listening from and what you think about today's topic. We always enjoy seeing how global our audience truly is.
That's absolutely right, James. And I think what makes this topic so important right now is that we are seeing several problems happening at the same time. Oil prices are going up, ships are changing their routes to avoid dangerous areas, and countries around the world are feeling the economic pressure.
Exactly, Olivia. And today we want to help you understand all of this calmly and clearly. Our goal is not to create fear or alarm, but to give you a calm, balanced, and educational understanding of how these global systems work.
In this episode, we are going to cover quite a lot of ground. First, we will look at the background, what is happening right now and how we got here. Then we will explore the geography of the region and why it matters so much for global trade.
After that, we will talk about the key players, the countries, organizations, and groups that are involved. We will look at the economics, how rising oil prices affect everyday life. And then we will discuss possible scenarios or different ways this situation could develop.
We will also talk about the challenges, why this problem is not easy to solve, and finally, the long-term consequences, meaning what might change in the years ahead.
And throughout this episode, we will highlight key vocabulary that you can use in your everyday English. So stay with us, take notes, and let's explore this important topic together.
So let's start with the background. What is actually happening, and why is this in the news?
Well, Olivia, the situation in the Middle East has been very tense, meaning full of stress and danger, for quite some time. The conflict in Gaza, which began in late 2023, has continued and has created ripple effects across the region. A ripple effect is when one event causes other events, like when you throw a stone into water and you see the circles spreading outward.
That's a great image, James. And one of the most important ripple effects has been what is happening in the Red Sea. A group called the Houthis, who control part of Yemen, have been attacking ships in the Red Sea. They say they are doing this to show support for Gaza.
And this has caused a huge problem for global shipping. Many large shipping companies have decided it is too dangerous to use the Red Sea route, so they are now going around Africa instead, around the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southern tip of the African continent.
That extra journey adds around 10 to 14 days to each voyage. Think about this. If you are sending products from Asia to Europe, this longer route means more time, more fuel, and much higher costs.
And of course, if transportation costs go up, the prices of many products go up too. This is one of the reasons why we have seen upward pressure on prices in many parts of the world.
Now, it is interesting to look at this historically. Has something like this happened before? Actually, yes. In 1956, during what is known as the Suez Crisis, the Suez Canal, which connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, was blocked for several months. This caused oil prices to spike and created serious economic problems in Europe and other parts of the world.
So this is not entirely a new situation. History is showing us a pattern. When important shipping routes are disrupted, the whole global economy feels it. Ask yourself, why would events in one small region affect prices in countries thousands of kilometers away? That is exactly what we are going to explore today.
Let's talk about geography now, because I think this is really the key to understanding why this matters so much.
Absolutely, Olivia. So let me describe the region for our listeners who may not be very familiar with the map. The Middle East is the area that connects three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. It includes countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Yemen, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates.
And through this region pass some of the most important waterways, meaning bodies of water used for transport, in the entire world.
The most famous is the Suez Canal in Egypt. This canal connects the Red Sea in the south to the Mediterranean Sea in the north. It is one of the most important shortcuts in the world for ships traveling between Asia and Europe. Without it, ships would have to go all the way around Africa, which adds thousands of kilometers to the journey.
Think of it like this. Imagine you live in an apartment building and the elevator, the lift, is broken. You can still reach your apartment, but now you have to walk up 20 flights of stairs. It takes much longer, you use much more energy, and it is much more expensive in the end. That is what happens to shipping when the Red Sea route becomes too dangerous.
I love that analogy, Olivia. Near the Red Sea, there is also a narrow passage called the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman. About 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait. 20%. That means 1 in every 5 barrels of oil in the world goes through this narrow water passage. If that strait were ever closed or disrupted, the economic consequences would be enormous. It would be like blocking the main water pipe in a city. Everything would be affected.
And for ordinary people, this geography translates into very real consequences. When shipping costs go up, the prices of electronics, clothing, food, and fuel all go up. People in Europe, Asia, and Africa feel these price increases at the supermarket or the petrol station.
Imagine if you were a small business owner in Germany or South Korea or Nigeria. You import goods from China or India. Suddenly, your shipping costs have doubled. You either lose money or you raise your prices and your customers suffer. Think about this the next time you look at a product label that says made in China or imported from Asia.
Now let's talk about the key players, the main actors in this situation.
The first major group is OPEC+. OPEC stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The plus sign means that some non-OPEC countries, like Russia, are also part of the group. Together, OPEC Plus controls a very large share of the world's oil production.
These countries, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Russia, have been deliberately limiting oil production. When there is less oil available and demand stays high, prices go up. This is basic economics. And by controlling production, OPEC Plus has enormous power over the global economy.
The second important player is the United States. The U.S. has two roles here. First, it is a major oil producer itself. In fact, it is currently the world's largest oil producer. Second, it is deeply involved in the Middle East diplomatically and militarily.
The U.S. has sent warships to the Red Sea region to try to protect shipping. It has also been involved in diplomatic efforts, meaning negotiations and conversations, to try to reduce tensions in the region.
Then we have Iran. Iran is a very interesting and complex player. It has been accused of supporting the Houthi group in Yemen, which has been attacking ships. Iran denies direct involvement, but many analysts, meaning experts who study these situations, believe Iran has significant influence over what is happening.
Iran also sits next to the Strait of Hormuz, which we mentioned earlier. This gives Iran significant leverage, meaning power to influence a situation, because it could potentially disrupt oil flows if tensions escalate further.
Then we have countries like China and India, which are the world's biggest oil importers, meaning they buy enormous amounts of oil from other countries. They have strong economic reasons to want stability and low prices.
Here is something that might surprise you. China has very good trade relationships with both Saudi Arabia and Iran, countries that are rivals of each other. So China tries to stay somewhat neutral because it needs good relationships with both sides. This is a good example of how economic interests can sometimes push countries towards diplomacy rather than conflict.
And consider this from the perspective of ordinary people in these countries. In Saudi Arabia, many government services are paid for by oil revenue. In Yemen, millions of people are suffering from one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. In Iran, ordinary citizens are dealing with sanctions, which are economic penalties imposed by other countries that make everyday goods expensive and hard to find. The decisions made by governments affect real human lives.
Let's move to the economics section, because I think this is where the topic becomes very personal for our listeners.
Right, James. Let me explain how oil prices connect to everyday life. Oil is not just something you put in your car. It is used to make electricity in many countries. It heats homes. It is used in factories to make plastic, chemicals, and many other products. And it powers the ships, trucks, and planes that carry goods around the world.
So when oil prices go up, a chain reaction begins. Producers, the people who make goods, pay more for energy and transportation, so their costs go up. And when their costs go up, they charge more for their products. This is called inflation, which is the general rise in prices across the economy.
Let me give you a concrete example. Think about a loaf of bread. Wheat is grown on a farm, which uses fuel for tractors. The wheat is transported to a flour mill, which uses energy to run its machines. The flour goes to a bakery, also using energy. The bread is then transported to a supermarket in a truck that runs on diesel, which is a type of fuel made from oil. If oil prices go up at every step of this journey, the price of that one loaf of bread goes up too.
And it is not just bread. Clothes, electronics, medicines, almost everything you buy has been transported somewhere, and that transportation uses oil.
Now, who suffers the most? The answer is not the same everywhere. In wealthy countries like Germany, the United States, or Japan, governments can sometimes help citizens by reducing fuel taxes or providing financial support. People also generally earn higher wages, so price increases, while painful, are manageable.
But in poorer countries, the situation is very different. Many developing nations, countries that are still building their economies, import most of their oil and have little financial protection. When oil prices rise by 20 or 30%, ordinary families may struggle to afford food or heating. In some countries, higher oil prices have led to protests and serious social unrest.
The financial markets, meaning the stock exchanges and currency markets around the world, also react very quickly to news about oil. When there is uncertainty or fear, investors often move their money to safer places. Oil companies see their share prices go up, while airlines and shipping companies see their profits fall.
Ask yourself, have you noticed higher prices in your country recently? Prices for food, fuel, or imported goods? If you have, there's a good chance that events in the Middle East and rising energy costs are part of the explanation.
Now let's look at possible scenarios, meaning different ways this situation could develop in the coming months.
Scenario 1 is a gradual de-escalation. De-escalation means a reduction in tension and conflict. In this scenario, diplomatic efforts succeed. The fighting in Gaza eventually decreases, the Houthi attacks on ships stop or become less frequent, and the Red Sea route becomes safe again.
If this happens, shipping costs would fall. Oil prices would probably stabilize or even decrease slightly. Inflation pressures would reduce in many countries. Financial markets would react positively, and people around the world would start to see some relief from high prices.
This scenario is possible, but it requires a lot of political will and cooperation from many different parties, which is historically very difficult in the Middle East.
Scenario 2 is a continued stalemate. A stalemate is a situation where nobody wins and nobody loses. Things just stay the same. The conflict continues at a medium level. Ships keep going around Africa. Oil prices stay elevated, meaning they remain high. Inflation continues in many countries.
In this scenario, the world essentially adapts to a new normal. Companies find new solutions, like using different trade routes or changing their supply chains. It is expensive and inefficient, but the global economy continues to function.
Scenario 3 is the most serious. This is an escalation where the conflict grows bigger and more dangerous. If Iran becomes more directly involved, if the Strait of Hormuz is threatened, or if the conflict spreads to other countries in the region, the consequences could be very severe.
In this scenario, oil prices could spike very sharply, possibly reaching levels we have not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. Many economies could enter recession, which means a period of falling economic activity and rising unemployment.
But let's be clear, nobody can predict with certainty which scenario will happen. The world is complex, and events can change quickly. Our goal here is not to create fear, but to help you understand the different possibilities so you can follow the news more intelligently.
Consider what would happen if your government suddenly announced emergency measures because of an energy crisis. Would you understand why? After today's episode, I think you would have a much better understanding.
So why can't the world simply solve this problem? Let's talk about the challenges.
The first challenge is political complexity. The Middle East has a long history of conflicts, rivalries, and competing interests. Different countries in the region have been competing for power and influence for decades. There is no simple solution that makes everyone happy.
The second challenge is that oil is deeply connected to the economics and politics of many countries. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia depend heavily on oil revenue to fund their governments and their citizens' quality of life. If oil prices fall too much, these countries face serious economic and political problems, so they have a strong interest in keeping prices high, which sometimes conflicts with the interests of oil importing countries.
The third challenge is that international organizations, like the United Nations, have limited power. They can encourage dialogue and negotiations, they can send peacekeepers to some situations, but they cannot force countries to stop fighting or to open shipping lanes.
There's also an inequality challenge. As we mentioned, poorer countries are much more vulnerable to these economic shocks, meaning sudden negative changes. They often have less political influence in international negotiations. So the people who suffer the most from these crises are sometimes the people with the least power to change things.
And there is a short-term versus long-term tension. Solving the immediate crisis, getting ships safely through the Red Sea today, requires different solutions than addressing the deeper problems, like energy dependence and geopolitical conflicts that have been building for many years.
The honest answer is that there are no quick fixes here. Real change takes time, patience, and cooperation from many different parties. That can be frustrating to accept, but it is important to understand.
Let's now think about the long term. What might change in the years and decades ahead because of this situation?
One important long-term trend that this crisis is accelerating is the move towards renewable energy. Energy from the sun, wind, and other natural sources that do not run out. When oil prices are high and supply is uncertain, many governments and companies invest more heavily in solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles.
This is actually one of the positive effects that can come from a difficult situation. Countries that have been slow to develop renewable energy are now feeling a greater urgency to do so. The European Union, for example, has significantly increased its investment in clean energy since the energy crisis of 2022.
Another long-term change is the possible restructuring of global trade routes. If the Red Sea remains dangerous for a long period of time, some companies will permanently change how they move goods. New ports and routes might become more important. Africa's coastal ports, for example, could benefit from increased shipping traffic around the continent.
There is also a geopolitical shift happening. The dominance of the United States in the Middle East has been gradually declining. New relationships are forming. For example, China has been trying to play a bigger diplomatic role in the region. The relationship between OPEC countries and Western nations is changing.
Looking at history for guidance, after the oil crisis of the 1970s, which was in many ways similar to what we are seeing today, the world invested heavily in energy efficiency and alternative energy sources. That crisis ultimately led to many of the technologies and energy policies that exist today. Crises, while painful, sometimes push the world to innovate.
And what lessons can we take from all of this? Perhaps the most important is that global systems are deeply connected. An event in one part of the world, a conflict in a small country, a decision by a group of oil producers can affect the price of bread in a city on the other side of the planet. Understanding these connections makes us better citizens and better communicators in the global conversation.
Well, James, we have covered a lot of ground today. I think it is time to summarize the key lessons from this episode.
Absolutely. So, lesson number 1. Oil is not just an energy source, it is the engine of the global economy. When oil prices go up, almost everything becomes more expensive, from food to clothing to transportation.
Lesson number 2, geography matters enormously. The Middle East sits at the crossroads of 3 continents, and the waterways of that region carry a huge share of the world's trade and energy. When those routes are disrupted, the whole world feels the effects.
Lesson number 3. Global crises always affect poorer countries and ordinary people more severely than wealthy nations and powerful institutions. This is an important reality to keep in mind when we read the news.
And lesson number 4, these situations are complex and the solutions are not simple. But understanding the problems clearly, which is what you have been doing today, is always the first step towards better decisions and better policies.
We also want to remind you that engaging with topics like today's discussion provides a unique opportunity to improve your language skills while thinking about real-world issues. Every time you listen to real content like this, your vocabulary grows, your listening comprehension improves, and your confidence in English increases.
We really encourage you to follow international news in English regularly. You do not need to understand every word. Just listen, try to follow the general ideas, and look up the words that appear most often. Over time, you will be surprised by how much your English improves.
And remember, try to approach the news calmly and analytically. Headlines are often designed to create fear or excitement, but if you understand the background, the economics, and the geography behind a story, you can read the news with much more confidence.
Before we go, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, write a comment telling us which country you are listening from and what you think about today's topic. We read every comment, and we love seeing where our listeners are from around the world.
Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, knowledge of global affairs helps us not only understand the world, but also communicate effectively and continue learning English in a way that is both educational and highly relevant.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep learning.
See you in the next episode. Goodbye.